Hello, Alan. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you so much. I'm great.
You look great. You look so chilled, so relaxed,
Um,
such in a good place right now. Now, we are going to dive into talking about emotional regulation,
mhm.
sometimes called emotional self regulation, or maybe nervous system regulation, I think.
Yeah.
So, the reason that I've invited you onto the show to talk about this is because you recently went onto Facebook and announced that you had achieved the holy grail, which is emotional regulation. And so I've invited you here really to hear about how how you achieve this, because I know this is something that a lot of people also want to achieve. And so I just want to get into the story and how you did it and hear about what does success look like for somebody who has achieved this epic goal.
Oh, well, yeah. Okay, so just for clarity, I didn't it wasn't a destination, right? Like I didn't get
Okay.
there and I wasn't standing at the top of the mountain saying, I've done it. Uh, but I actually just mentioned the thing that I feel most proud of that I've
Yeah.
been working on so diligently over the past 4 years has been self-regulation or my nervous being able to regulate my own nervous system. That's the thing that I have been like cultivating over and over and over. So it and let me just say I'm not done, right? I'm not done by
No,
any
no, no.
means. It's
Are
a
we ever
journey.
done with this kind of work? I don't think we are we?
No, I don't think so. Um, so yeah, that's kind of where prompted this whole conversation is,
Yeah.
let's dive into like what that
Okay.
looks like.
So so before we dive into that, what is this? Right. Well, just so the people
Mm,
who are listening that aren't super clear on what we're talking about,
mhm.
what do you mean by emotional regulation or nervous system regulation? I mean, we can guess, but I want to hear it. How would you describe it?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different nuances associated with this. So like if in the most simplest terms, it's feeling safe inside of yourself,
Mm,
regardless of any outside circumstances. And safety is an interesting term, and I'm using that term deliberately because safety is different for every individual on planet Earth. Someone is going to feel safe in a different environment than other people. And having a regulated nervous system allows you to be more in choice and what I like to call like an active participant in the world around you, externally and internally, so
mm,
that you're not super reactive to things that are going on in your environment. So by having some sort of regulation, you can be more centered, be more calm, be more cool, collected. And then from that place, you can choose how you want to show up in in your life.
So does that mean you're not getting triggered? Does that mean you're not getting annoyed by things in the same way that things are just kind of you like, yeah, well, I'm not gonna that's not gonna touch me now. I'm kind of I'm over this. I don't know. Is that what that means? That this ability to stay calm for you, this kind of things happen around you, there can be chaos potentially, but you're able to kind of maintain a level of stillness within that doesn't get sucked into that drama, sucked into the chaos. Is that how you describe it?
I would say yes, it would allow you to have a more neutral approach to things that might have triggered you in the past, right?
Okay.
It doesn't mean that you're 100% gone of triggers, but the triggers that used to trigger you before, you can actually embody, and they don't bother you anymore.
Yeah.
But like an evolution, like I said, this is not done. Things that used to trigger me before don't trigger me now, and the things that didn't trigger me before, I'm all of a sudden getting triggered now. So it's like a
Oh,
little,
interesting.
it's this interesting game that we're playing,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no, so interesting, isn't it? And so when you get triggered now,
Mhm.
how are you finding that now does your trigger response does that show up slightly differently now, or is it still a similar kind of reactive
Mhm.
response to where it was before? Like, are you when you are getting these moments where the world does affect you, are
Mhm.
you maybe calmer about it, or is that response changed?
Yeah. So I would say it's changed because I've proven to myself over and over and over again that a trigger is temporary. When
Mm,
before being more unconscious, and very reactive. In a trigger response, you kind of can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and you think it's just going to take over. But now I've proven that I can work through triggers, whether by myself or with the help of other people or whatever it may be, just some daily practices. Um, but it doesn't feel like totality, like it's all going to come to an end. It's more like, okay, I'm triggered right now. Okay, what do I need? Like what do I need in this trigger in this moment right now? It's like, okay, and then you kind of like coach yourself through it. It's great.
So let's rewind then.
Yeah.
Go back in time to
Mhm.
when, at the beginning of this story, where
Mhm.
you mentioned 4 years ago, you've been really
Mhm.
diligently pursuing this as a personal goal for you.
Mhm.
So what was it that was going on? I mean, what was going on 4 years ago? Like, what's the beginning that made you go, I've really got to sort this out? Like, this is like, I don't know, my life is in a situation, I'm feeling in a place where this has just got to, if I don't fix it, I don't know what's going to get. Like, paint us a picture as to what was
Mhm.
going on when you made the decision that this was really important thing for you to pursue.
Yeah. Okay. So just over 4 years ago, I I had been working really, really hard in my marriage to keep things together. And we finally hit a breaking point where I realized that we couldn't just continue on the same trajectory. It just was not working out. We were not compatible, as far as that version of our relationship, being husband and wife. We co-parent now, but at that time, making that decision to co-parent was extremely difficult for me, and it created a whole lot of stress in the family, in our community, and like everything that we had built together over the half a decade together, right? So um I chose to leave my marriage. Really, really difficult, really, really hard. I actually had family members tell me that, sorry, Alan, your decision is breaking. It destroyed my family relationships, not just my marriage, right? So it just created this wake, an effect to the point where I felt like I didn't have anybody except like two really close friends. Um, at that time, when I decided to leave my marriage, I also, because of my divorce, there was a bunch of lawsuits that my ex-wife ended up putting up on all of my companies. So all of my businesses then had lawsuits against them, to claim equity and shares and this and that. And most of my businesses had business partners, in them. And in order to protect my business partners, I had to liquidate all of the shares of my companies for pennies on the dollar to get them out of the lawsuits that were plaguing the company. So now I was left with no businesses. I sold all of my shares of all the companies that I've worked for pennies on the dollar, when really they should have been sold for much, much more, bigger multiples. I had active lawsuits going on. I had subpoenas on all my bank accounts where I couldn't withdraw or take out any money because it was all locked down. And I was also supporting my ex-wife and my life, and there was a lot going on. A lot of attorneys. I was talking to a lot of attorneys, and I was talking to a lot of judges, and really that was my life. And it was pure chaos. I had no family. It felt like I had no family, right? It felt like my friend group didn't understand what was going on. I was a part of a couple of communities, and because of some of the legal drama that was going on with my businesses, a lot of my entrepreneur community said, Alan, there's just too much happening in your life right now. Why don't you come back when it's not so chaotic? So I kind of like lost my entire community system, support system, and I was alone.
Right.
Um, and I felt very alone.
Yeah.
Um, I was actually talking to a really good friend of mine, telling him this story. He also got divorced, but when he got divorced, he doubled down on his business, and like his business ended up growing. He just poured all of his energy into that. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I go, wow, when I got divorced, I couldn't double down into my businesses. So I was just left floating in
Mm.
the middle of nowhere, in just like this void, and had nothing to cling onto or grasp a hold of to give me any breath of fresh air. So I just went internal and just started working on myself and just started like, okay, well, what's coming up now? What else can I do? How else, like, how can I change these patterns that brought me to this level of chaos in my life
Mm.
so I don't repeat the same thing over again?
So that, I mean, that does sound like a hugely chaotic situation. So wow.
Oh, it's no good. No good.
No, no, no. And
I
so
didn't like it.
and you did something very brave actually to go in inward and
Mm,
to do that kind of okay, because yes, when we have that kind of chaos going around, there is a part of us that's like, well, hang on, I've created this on some level. So what is it
mhm,
about me that has
mhm,
brought this into my life? So that beginning of that personal exploration, that kind of digging inward, how did you go about doing that? Was that a solitary thing? Did you get help? Did you talk to friends? Was it books? Like what helped you at the beginning of that journey?
It was a combination of all of those. I think because I didn't have something to clamp into, like it can at the divorce was so bad, like I didn't even really have time with my kids because there was so we were working out the custody situation then. So like I couldn't like pour into my family or into my kids. The businesses I couldn't pour into. So I was like, okay, let's figure out what's out there. And it was a little bit of everything. It was reading, it was podcasts, it was finding new communities, and new kind of like modalities, and uh, that kind of aligned with this new journey that I was going to be embarking on. I didn't realize that it was a new journey that I was going on. I kind of just saw it as like the next progression. Um, and maybe it was like a different fork in the road, like, oh,
Mm,
you could keep going this way, or here's the fork. And, it's not too far outside of the envelope, but it like just kind of kept going.
yeah.
Um, a big community that I found was out actually in Denver, Colorado. It started in Austin and then went to Denver, and it's kind of like uh, this group, and I ended up starting to go to their retreats, these personal development retreats, talking with them about their, journeys, and like what sharing my experiences internally. So it kind of like created a really safe space to explore sharing the shit that I was in. Um,
Mm.
along with therapists and along with friends and along with journaling and a lot of meditation. Yeah, all of that.
So you basically just reached out for as much that you could find that could really try different things, see
Mhm.
what worked, experiment. I don't know, just really try stuff. It was really like, oh, I'm just going to see anything that can help me here. Would that be a fair kind of reflection
Yeah.
that you go through?
Yeah, in hindsight, yes. Yeah, that's exactly what I was doing. Trying to cling to anything, right?
Yeah. And did you find, was it at that point, were you able to kind of go, oh, that feels like that's working. Oh, no, that isn't. Or did you not get a sense of, I'm just going to keep doing all of it because it's bound to pay off eventually? Like, was there a sense that some of it was working and you were noticing something and some
Mhm.
of it was maybe less? Or was it just a blind faith? I'm just going to keep going here because it's got to work. Like, where were you at on that?
Right in the beginning, I would say it was like, let's do everything because something's got to work right in the beginning.
Mm,
But because of the communities that I was starting to be involved with, and sort of the work, the interpersonal work that I was doing, and the therapist work, and the journaling, and just more of like this consciousness work, like why are we doing the things that we're doing? I was able to ask myself early on in that process, why am I actually going out to this thing? Do I even want to be doing this? Does this even feel good to me? And then
mm,
I'd have like people, friends go, why are you doing that? And I'm like, I don't know why I'm doing that. Hold on. Like, yeah, we can kill that thing. I don't need to just blatantly do something anymore. So it was like the introspection work that was just coming online then, of why am I doing all of this? Because I never asked myself that question. Why am I
mm,
doing what I'm doing? And it led
mm,
me to a place of like not being okay.
mm.
because if you run 100 miles an hour and not stop to ask yourself the question of why am I actually doing this,
Yeah.
you can go pretty far and then realize why am I even here.
Yeah.
So it was like a little bit of I would say in the beginning, just very short for a brief sprint of time, maybe like 3 to 4 months of just clamming onto everything, and then really just like, hold on, what
Mm.
does feel good to me? Does that feel good to me? Can I slow down enough to be like, hold on, let me give that a week and give that a decision. Let me actually feel into if that feels in alignment.
Mm.
Because I didn't really have anything else to do at that time except check in with myself.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe at the
Mhm.
beginning it was a bit of like running away from the shit show that was behind you. And then when
Bingo.
you got a little bit quite far enough away from it that you could not feel the heat so much, you're like, hang on a minute, okay, I can slow down a little bit now and
Yeah,
review some of the things I'm doing.
that's a
And
great
then,
analogy. Yeah, totally.
oh, thank you. It's one of my superpowers, I think, of coming up with analogies on the fly.
Yeah.
Now, what I'm just wondering with at some point when you maybe had a little bit of a breather, did you maybe sort of then go, actually, I want to head over here now? Emotional regulation. Yeah, I'm gonna go towards that, or I'm gonna go towards like. Did you have a kind of a goal in mind or an outcome that you had that you were maybe I really want to get to this point because when I'm at this point, I'm going to feel I don't know better or I don't know. Was there some markers in the sand that you were maybe aiming for at this point? You know that you could identify.
I wouldn't say that there was markers in the sand. There wasn't markers. There was more like exploration.
Mm,
That's kind of it. I kind of felt like I was excavating,
nice.
and like, um, that's really what it feels like. It's like, oh well, like, do I even know who I am? Let me
Mm.
pull back this layer. I was like, oh my gosh, that's me. I I had no idea that I did that. Oh my God. And the way that that was installed and programmed, like, of course it all makes sense. Like, it was like this fun game of exploration of like, can I get to learn who I am even deeper? And, like, why do I do the things that I do? And, like really exploring the way that these patterns were installed early on kind of became the game of
Yeah,
exploration.
yeah. So do you think you're a little bit of a pattern expert now in terms of like,
Uh,
having like wrestled with your own or untangled them or kind of like looked at them inside out and all that exploration work? You kind of are you a little bit more knowledgeable? Not knowledgeable. That sounds like the wrong word, but I don't know. I don't know. Like confidence. Not confident. That's also the wrong word. But yeah,
can I
this
throw out a
sense
word?
of go on. Yeah, throw in with your idea.
Some wisdom.
Wisdom.
There's there's some wisdom. And like, why are we like, oh, I see you doing something. That pattern keeps playing out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you
For
can spot them a
myself and
mile
others.
away. Like once you've kind of got that, you've done that inner work. I think you can just see it so much more clearly in others. That
Yes.
then, and then the trick is then just keeping quiet if they're not interested in knowing about their damaging.
Yeah. Yeah. The big thing is waiting for the invite. Don't, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, yeah,
Wait for the invite. Yeah, you don't want to just start. I see this thing that doesn't really work out too well.
yeah.
Yeah, sounds to
So
me
when
like sounds to me like you've done that a number of times.
well, I've learned a long time ago to stop doing that,
Yeah.
and I will not wade in with my thoughts
Mm,
on as somebody that kind of clears lots of people's head trash.
mm.
If people
But
want
what's
my help doing that, then they need to come and ask me because I
yeah.
will not volunteer that information now.
Mhm. But that's also one beauty of like having a calm, regulated nervous system is like someone can be doing something and it doesn't even affect you at all. So you could
Mm.
just sit there with your mouth closed and be like, oh yeah, there they are.
Yeah, yeah, they
If
are
I
like
need to,
driving into a ditch, and I'm fine with that. I don't feel need to go wrestle the steering wheel off them and steer them out of the way.
yeah, it's really changed a lot of my relationships, especially with like old family members. Where it's
Mm.
like I don't really appreciate their behavior or how they show up. Um, but I can appreciate them. And then I just like don't take it personally that they're behaving
Yeah,
a certain way. It's like, oh yeah, I just see like how your patterns unfolded and these are now coping mechanisms and like I actually have a lot more compassion for where you are in your life journey and that's okay. And I don't need to change you. or like want you to be different. And if you're willing to show up to the conversation and we could talk about it, sure, absolutely. But I don't need you to change for me.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a huge one, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
That when you can get to that level, especially
Mm-hmm.
with people that your friend, your family, your close friends, to
Mm-hmm.
not kind of have this compulsion to want to go in and help them, fix them, heal them, rescue them, whatever that archetype is, that kind
Mm-hmm.
of wades in, to kind of be able to sit there and just allow that this damaging pattern that maybe they're playing out. You can just see where you can see where it's gonna end, and you're like, this is really sad and hard for me to watch, but like,
Mm-hmm.
it's not my place to say, it's not my place to
Mm-hmm.
get involved. That I've been wrestling with some of that recently, where it's like, yeah, I've just got to hold this. This is me dealing with me wanting. I'm not going to wade in, but it's hard when you're watching somebody with these patterns that aren't healthy, that aren't serving them,
Mm-hmm.
to not say anything. It's not an easy one, that one for me. But I think if you can achieve that, you deserve a couple of medals on your right arm for that one, I think.
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. And it still doesn't mean that like I don't get sad when my feelings get
Mm,
hurt because they're showing up a certain way. I'm not like void of emotion. Like I still
mm,
have my feelings around it,
yeah.
but it's a more removed place of just honoring both of us. Like
Mm,
honoring my feelings in it and also honoring them in their process of where they're at. So it's just allows for both of us to be held.
yeah. Brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering, out the things that you did early on, or maybe not early on, because it's a 4-year journey. So I'm just wondering what worked really well for you. Like, was there a sequence of things where you started with this, and then it became this, and then you were kind of grew into doing that, and then you outgrew that, and then you tried this? I mean, what kind of, out of all the things that you did, were there some things that have been accompanied you the whole way? Because actually, there's been certain things that have been really good for you, just stuck with that one thing, or has there been a mishmash, or I don't know, like what's it looked like for you in terms of things that have really moved the needle and helped you to really change how you feel?
Yeah. There's been a ton. So many. So like I would consider this. Okay, what's the best example that I can give you here? Okay, so when like embarking on something like this, there's a destination, right? There's some vague destination, but think of this more as like a journey,
Mm,
and think of this as like learning a new language. So learning a new language, first you need to understand the words, and like things start compounding on one another. So then once you understand the words, then you can formulate sentences. And then when you can formulate sentences, then you can go out into the environment and probably have a conversation. And then once you're having a conversation, then you can be like more immersed in the culture of wherever you are having speaking that language. So like there's baby steps to like crawling to like walking, and then you're just an active participant in this dialogue. So
mm,
think of it like that, like learning a new language. And also with learning a new language, you're not going to pick it up on day one. It's
mm,
going to take effort. It's going to take probably a lot of trial and error, and like you'll mispronounce things and people won't understand you, and like you won't understand yourself, and like so like just be gentle. You're learning a new language. um and also, what's the best way to learn a new language? Immerse yourself in it.
yeah.
Like start trying different things on. Just
Mm,
start trying different things and different ways to keep cultivating that language. Will help reinforce it over and over again.
mm,
So for me, what I found is like having daily practices
mm,
that allow you to slow down. What I've realized is like a lot of our life, well, first off, society is not set up for people to be in a proactive state. Society, culture is designed for people to be in a reactive state. And
mm,
when you're in a reactive state, you cannot slow down enough to make choices on how you want to show up in life. So you're essentially moving through life on autopilot.
mm,
What you want to do is start slowing things down so you can be more in choice with how you choose to show up to different things.
mm,
So some things that have worked really well for me are daily practices like meditation. I've been meditating for a very long time, but I realized that um, once it allowed me to get faculties and like bring homeostasis back, that was like, oh, okay, hold on. Rather than clear my mind, how can I clear my emotions, thoughts, feelings, so I can show up in a neutral place and have more choice in how do I want to show up here.
Mm.
So meditation's a big one. The other, another one is, okay, so like when I had all of these attorney calls and judge calls and like stuff like that, and I'd like show up to like craziness. There's a device called the Apollo Neuro. It's a wearable, and it's like a little watch that you put on your wrist or on your ankle, and you control it with your smartphone. And that device will send little pulses to your body, and it will actually help regulate and calm your nervous system for you.
Oh, wow.
So, a couple of the different things that they have on the app is like, do you want coffee? Like, it'll actually energize you to keep you focused for like the second half of your day, or it'll help you fall asleep because it'll like calm you down, or it'll help you with stress. And that was like a big one. I just had that thing on stress mode and cranked that thing up to 10. It's just like, okay, just like calming myself down. But really what that is helping you do is remember what a calm nervous system actually feels like. Because when we are born, most times, sometimes, depending on the uterus that you're growing in, a baby is essentially calm, right? It's through living in stress and stimulus and environmental circumstances that it jacks the nervous system up. And that's how we create those patterns and beliefs and everything like that. So remembering what a calm nervous system feels like is really important. So like another thing that I did, these communities that I would go to, we would sit in ceremony and we would take substance. And this substance would allow us to get into a harmonious state. So there's dozens and dozens and dozens of these communities out there. I found something that was very light and very gentle. I would consider it like psychosomatic, not psychedelic.
Okay.
It's not like an ayahuasca or anything like that, but it's more just like calming, peaceful presence. And then we would talk about like, hey, what came up? What happened? Like, tell me about your experience, integrating that experience, and essentially like helping you realize patterns, to create new maps for yourself internally. Trying to think what else. Journaling's a big one. Oh, you know what a big one it was for me?
Tell me.
You wouldn't know, like probably a huge one.
Tell me.
Having a partner,
Okay.
hold me in my shit.
Oh,
That
huge.
was that was a huge one.
Yeah.
That like having someone just be neutral as I was thrashing around and not like
Yeah.
just like flopping and flailing and like not being okay, like and just like hold me in like energetically, physically, mentally, emotionally, like when I say hold in all those areas.
Yeah.
And just like really just like, okay, I can work through this, but not helping me get anywhere. Just holding me in it and just being a present source of just presence to allow me to get through those triggers, those rough spots, and then helping me remind myself that I can do it. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that was a big one.
Yeah. I mean, has she had training for that? I mean, that's a special skill, isn't it? To hold somebody
It
to do
really
that.
is.
I mean, there are therapists that can't do that, and that's their job, right?
Yeah.
So,
You're
you
right.
are a very lucky man.
I'm the luckiest man on planet Earth. I swear to God, I am. I swear to God, I am the luckiest man on planet Earth. I know it too.
Yeah, because
And
having that somebody to hold that space is that's where transformation takes place, when you have the safety of that space that you can be
Mhm.
in.
Yeah, Yeah. And cultivating safety and trust in that, in the relationship. Having friends that you can call. And
Mm.
here's a trick. Like, I've had friends call me and I call them. But like, how often do you get a friend and like you call them up and you're like, hey, blah blah blah, and you're like sharing with them the stress of the day. My kids did this and blah, blah. I had to pick them up from school, and like, I don't know, like the school got canceled. I don't know. I had this big deadline at work. Like, you name it, right? You've
Yeah.
got a friend that you, and they'll come back at you and they'll be like, well, what about this and what about that and blah 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 blah, blah, blah. And sometimes we don't need advice.
Yeah.
We just need a listening ear.
Yeah.
So it's become like a shorthand when someone like calls and it's like, oh, hey, real quick for this conversation, do I just need a listen, or are you looking for advice? And and just like that simple question will just reshape how that person is feeling supported in that moment.
Yeah. Because a lot of people just assume that they're being called for advice and for
Yes.
help to fix this situation. So they launch straight into that without
Mm-hmm.
checking first that might be what you need.
Mm-hmm.
Because often it is just a question of verbalizing your day, expressing it, getting out of your system. Because often when you've been through like a shitty day and you just need to talk it through, just the talking it through, when it kind of changes form from this experience that you've lived to now, I'm now choosing words to describe this experience. And I'm putting these words that I've chosen into a sentence. And now I've heard it. I'm like, no, that wasn't it. I need to come up with a new sentence. Oh, then that word's not right. Oh, and actually that processing that you're going through in expressing your experience is part of that's the work. And you need somebody to just be there that can be on the receiving end of you just spewing this verbal stuff.
Yes.
And not interrupt you or not go, oh, I had that happened to me yesterday, and let me tell you about my experience. No. Shut up. I just need you to listen.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. It's like you can't even finish what you wanted to explain or like get out, and they're already cutting you off to like tell you about this time that they've already worked through it. And it's like, wait a second, hold on.
Yeah, but that has such an impact, doesn't it? When you've been like cut in your flow, suddenly you just don't feel like you can continue with this kind of release of what you were going through, because you just know it's not going to be received in the way that it needs to be received. And that really kind of stifles our own, then you kind of come away from that conversation feeling like you haven't really let that thing go that you needed to let go of. So, one of the things I held a conversation, I did a Facebook Live a couple of days ago about this, about holding space and what that means and being present. And when people, I think with this the culture that we're in now with like the, TikTok and instant gratification and needing to get to the point in 20 seconds, otherwise your video won't get to the feed. And this kind of very fast pace, there isn't this, we're just not used to communicating to real people and having actual conversations, because lockdown, I mean, I was just thinking that your whole experience happened, there was the COVID situation going on in the background with everything that's going on for you, which I imagine
didn't help a thing.
Added a whole new layer of fun to everything.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. So yeah, came out in broke free of my marriage in 2019, and then right into everything. Just the whole world shut down. Like, so it was just disastrous.
No, that was. I mean, that added a whole new, but that whole experience for everybody means that we
for everyone,
same way.
Yeah. So what's really interesting about that is like, I think that's perpetuating a lot of the feelings that are going on in the world right now. I've heard this a couple times from a couple different people that COVID, the lockdowns, was labeled like secondary trauma, but it was triggering everybody's primary trauma.
Yeah.
So now everyone is in lockdown, fully activated in PTSD first trauma responses, and like, talk about not regulated nervous systems.
No, I know.
Everyone's all jacked up.
And then no wonder we're where we are today.
Yes.
Having had that backdrop where everybody's in this kind of, and they're not really, and you've got this mass PTSD happening on a collective level.
Yep.
Where people are still playing out, and they've been, and yeah, and what's going on as a result of that is hardly surprising that we're facing what we're facing today. And
Yeah.
so having, I think, going inward to do this kind of self-exploration work and digging into some of these traumas.
Mhm.
You talked about it awoken or it triggered primary traumas. So as part of your journey, did you kind of go trauma digging? Did you kind of head into the the abyss of the trauma land and start maybe digging through some of yours? Was that part of your journey as well?
Yeah, it was. The term that we call it, we Ash, my wife and I, we call it just trauma hunting,
Oh,
right?
lovely! I love it.
Yeah, we go trauma hunting. But we don't want to actually go trauma hunting. Early on, I went trauma hunting. Because trauma creates blind spots, and then trauma also creates patterns. Trauma also creates belief systems. Trauma also creates your reality, how you're operating in the world. So if you're on an internal or consciousness journey or doing some introspection, sure, looking at your trauma is necessary, because behind that trauma, you'll find your power, you'll find different patterns to be broken, you'll find belief structures that you didn't even know were there, called blind spots. Oh, yeah, you'll find a lot behind trauma. So a lot of my work has been healing some of my primary trauma. Yeah,
Okay.
for
And was
sure.
some of that from was that because the way I look at trauma is there's the traumas that we're aware of that we've been through in our life that we can kind of go, oh yeah, I had that shitty experience when I was whatever. But then there's lots of the unconscious traumas, so the ones that maybe you experienced before you had conscious memory, so under the age of 5, for example. And then there are those that maybe you experienced in utero. So your mother would have experienced them, and so you experience that vicariously through her. And then there's ancestral trauma where you've got the memories of that trauma from your lineage that are just within your DNA. And if you believe in past life, then you have past life trauma. So, I mean, there's a lot to go at when we start looking at trauma. So I'm just wondering,
Yes.
out of all that, where did you kind of look for all of it? Did you go trauma hunting everywhere, or did you kind of stick in certain trauma zones? I don't know. How was your trauma hunting trip for you?
I'm so glad that you just labeled all those. You just gave me free reign to talk about all of them.
Oh yes. You can talk about galactic trauma as well if you want, because that has been also a thing that I've had clients bring to.
Interesting. That's the first I have not heard of galactic trauma.
Well, I've coined the name, so that's my
Okay.
term.
Tell
But
me
it's
about it.
traumas experienced on other planets. So I didn't know that was a thing until this client asked me to test for it for her. And yes,
Wow.
she did have that.
Okay.
So now I test that in all my clients, and it's remarkable how often it comes back as being that they have got galactic trauma going on. So but that's a whole other episode. So let's not get distracted by galactic trauma.
No, that's fine. But let's definitely keep talking about that after this. I'm interested. Yeah. Yes. So all of those traumas I have looked at, and I've explored, and I've worked really, really hard on reshaping, reshaping those traumas. Um, um, it's really interesting once you start going down those paths, like the ancestral trauma. It's a real thing. People
Oh,
don't. It is a real thing. Everybody has it, and I'm like, oh my gosh, how come no one's teaching this stuff? What is going on? And clearly you are, but like the book, It Didn't Start With You. Once I read that book, oh my gosh, realizing that trauma is stored in our DNA and all of that. So yeah, trauma in utero, I've experienced that. So my mom had cancer when she was 7 years old, and was
when she
riddled
was
with
7.
when she was 7.
Okay.
And back then, they didn't have like pinpointed radiation. They just cooked your entire body, right?
Oh God,
So
yeah.
I grew in a uterus that was like radiated on.
Oh my gosh.
And my own like I've had my own belief structures in there, that like massive amounts of fear that was also my mother's, my own fear of being born into this world, in this environment. And then also like the beliefs of like life is death, and like because
Yeah.
it started out so early that it was kind of like death for her. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, weird, uh yeah,
Yeah.
impactful
Interesting.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. No, I mean, when you start digging into the in utero trauma, and then your own birth experience, like how you would have
Yeah.
experienced your own birth,
Hmm.
is hugely. I mean, that sets up emotional patterns that a lot of people maybe don't appreciate
Yeah,
as
that's
well.
the
Like whether or not you're a C-section baby,
Mhm.
this where you have habits of being pulled out of situations because you haven't got that ability to initiate yourself compared
Mhm.
to a vaginal birth. So even when it goes into the mode of your arrival,
Yes.
can set up emotional blueprints for life, that you
Mhm.
don't. I mean, these are all just rich with, when you're hunting for trauma and hunting for your head trash,
Mhm.
your in utero experience, conception, your birth are just rich pickings for
Yes.
stuff but because we haven't got conscious recollections of it, it can feel
Mhm.
a little bit like you're wading through the dark. You're like, I'm in a cave, I'm hitting walls, I'm hitting things on the floor, but I don't know what the hell I'm hitting. But there's definitely stuff here. Just wish I
Mhm.
knew what it was. I don't know, like in terms of your own experience of digging through all of that, were you able to get some clarity about what some of those traumas were and draw the link back to how that manifested in your behavior? Or I mean, maybe it's still a work in progress. I don't know. Have you got anything that you can share with us about your experience of diving into some of that stuff?
Yeah, so probably like the biggest, the one that kind of like coincides with everything that we just talked about on this show. Um, so I was really neglected as a child, kind of just like left alone.
Mm,
Not much care, nurturance, mirroring, compassion, and just not a lot of energy was spent
mm,
towards me. And that experience created a belief that I must be bad
mm,
since nobody will spend time with me, since
mm,
I'm all alone. I must be a bad person. That belief anchored that early on, and I'm talking like really early. Um, that belief that was anchored early on created a persona of me being a villain so that I can go and prove to people that I was good. So my default was villain. My actions were to prove that I was good.
okay.
Don't you see how good I'm doing? Don't you see how big of an impact I'm making? Don't you see how big of a provider I am? Don't you see how like it was a very big proving, having to prove and prove and proving energy, but to prove
Yeah.
that I was good
Yeah.
because I believed deep down that I was bad.
Yeah. So the villain energy was feeding your behavior.
Yep.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So then when I finally chose to leave a marriage that wasn't serving me or my children, knowing that I wasn't showing up fully in while being in that relationship, that I can only show up fully by being out of that relationship, guess what everyone projected on me?
Oh, you're the villain now.
Villain. Oh
Finally,
yes.
you've achieved villain status.
Yes. Yeah. And I'm like, but wait, hold on. Couldn't anybody not see all the good? Nope. Villain, villain, villain. So it was literally screaming in my face.
Wow.
The unconscious belief that I had integrated and started at such a young age. And it worked. What helped is me integrating that belief structure of like why it started, how it started, where like, and then finding compassion for that version of me that didn't actually get the uh,
The
anything,
love.
right?
Yeah.
And love,
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
from that young age, and like having so much just sorrow for him, right? Sorry, like, oh man, if that was my child, what I would do, the amount of
Oh.
love that I would pour into that little boy,
Mm,
and really healing and reshaping that pattern of trauma
mm,
so that so that my villain didn't come out sideways.
yeah. So you mentioned villain, which is an archetype, right? So I
Yes.
just wondered whether you kind of dabbled in archetypes because I'm looking at like healing through archetypes and identifying the archetypes within us and healing using that as a way to focus your healing efforts. Because
Mhm.
I like to be super efficient and effective in my approach and not like to waste time. And the great thing about an archetype is it's like a package of ready-made patterns
Mm-hmm.
and conflicts and beliefs. The villain is already, like, the victim's got a ready-made packet. So a lot of us resonate with a lot of key archetypes. In Caroline Mace, she says this: we all have the 4 survival archetypes. It's just child, the prostitute, the saboteur, and the victim. So we've all manifest that to some degree. And so
We all do. We
exactly.
have all.
So I just wonder, because you brought out villain, and whether you've been exploring archetypes. Has this been part of your journey, or did you just say that just on a whim just now?
I haven't actively been diving into archetypes, but it doesn't mean that I don't look at them and explore them. So a book that I'm reading right now is uh, King Warrior. Man, what is it? Do you know it off the top of your head? It's like King Warrior,
no. The one that's coming
Magician.
to my mind is about women with wolves, and now you're going King Warrior. So it's clearly the
No, it's definitely not that. No, it's about the masculine child, and how there's 4 of them, and each one has I would say a fully integrated side, and then each one has a shadow side.
Yeah.
And how they show up determines, behaviors, how they operate, how people perceive them in the world. Yeah.
It can be hugely insightful to dig into archetypes, I've found, and some of my clients are really, they find that incredibly useful. So it sounds like the villain. I mean, also when you've identified this in yourself, I think that can really give you very huge insights. So many things just start falling into place, and some aha moments. Because what I love about the healing journey, I don't know about you, are those insights and those aha moments. And you're like, oh my goodness, that's why I do that, right? And sometimes that's all you need, isn't it? To just go, you know what, I'm going to let that go. I do not need that anymore. Thank you for that insight. And now I'm putting it in the bin. Did you find that going on?
Yes. So what I find, what you're sharing is like, it allows you to, one, put language to something that's so just like you can't grasp, right?
Yeah, it's like
But
nebulous.
you can put language to it, and it's like, oh, that makes so much sense. Now I have a dialogue around this thing. And now that I have a dialogue around this thing, I can now have awareness. And through just the awareness can just create massive change.
Yeah, huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, huge. I'm just conscious of time, Alan, because I feel like we could talk for a long time, because I'm just obviously super interested in your healing journey. So I'm maybe to try and wrap this up a little bit. So and this journey so now when you're in a place where you feel like obviously you're still a work in progress, as we all are, but you've reached a place where you feel I can at least announce this on Facebook that I feel like I've achieved a good level of nervous system regulation.
Yeah, I wouldn't have done. Yeah, totally. Yes.
So when at the beginning you mentioned, oh, well, now I'm not getting triggered as easily. I can just kind of like just stay calm. Much more. What do your practices look like today? Like, have you parked a lot of them? Are you like still doing some of them? Like, what's it look like as part of your work in progress version? Like the ongoing work that you want to continue doing in terms of developing and continue to raise your consciousness, because it sounds like you're on that consciousness raising journey. Yeah. Would that be fair to say? You've mentioned the word consciousness a few times. So as you're continuing on that journey, what does that look like for you today?
Yeah. So daily and weekly, it'd be meditation. I have a daily journal that I use to kind of like pull me back to presence, and help me integrate a lot of the things that I'm working on, that a lot of that we talked about here on this call. That being like my own belief structures, how I'm reshaping what I'm working on internally, and how that's internally. I take some daily supplements that help me calm my nervous system. What else do I do? I have calls with friends. We have meetings. We meet up like every 6 weeks, and sit together and kind of like talk about what's coming up for us and what we're working on. And like having a community of support has been, I have not let that one go. And especially, I think I think community is what's missing, like
Yeah.
in for a lot of people. And I feel so honored to have that in my life.
Mm,
Um, Especially because we were torn away from community with the shutdowns and everything.
mm,
That really cultivating a true sense of belonging in a true community and a true tribe that
mm.
can see you for you, in with warts and all, right? So like
Yeah,
no
yeah,
one's perfect, right? Like
yeah, yeah.
with warts and all, is has been really really beautiful.
Brilliant. Well,
Mhm.
Alan, thank you so much for being so honest and open about your journey. It's been really brilliant. I've really enjoyed chatting this through with you. It's
Thank
been
you for asking the questions.
That's okay. And if anybody wants to, I don't know, like what we talked very much about your inner work, but we didn't really talk about your actual work,
Mhm.
your maybe the way that if people know, I don't know, do you want to be found and hunted down online for what you do? And if you do, would you like to tell us where we can find you? But if you don't, then
Um, I'm a little to be honest, I'm a little nervous to put myself out there online. Um,
you don't have to.
cause like who am I, right? Like who is me? But I think I know that I have a big thing coming up in January of 2024. So after the new year, going to be pushing a little bit further out into the interwebs.
Totally.
If any, yeah, if anyone wants to get on like a pre list with that, or if you're listening to this afterwards, like we'd love to have you. Um, they can find me at divineleader.io.
Okay. Well, I'll put the link in the show notes for this episode.
Thank
So
you.
thank you, Alan, for joining me today. It's been brilliant.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed this conversation.